So good evening, everyone. My name is Rachel Littman, the Executive Director of the Yale Alumni Nonprofit Alliance. Thank you for joining us this evening as we bring to you another terrific program from our New England leadership team. We've got educators this evening from across the New England area. I just wanted to quickly tell you about YANA. If you're not familiar, we are an official Yale alumni shared interest group. Our mission is to harness the power of the Yale alumni network and friends for the greater good. So we create community and we connect, convene, and catalyze those in the social impact space to help people thrive and the nonprofits they work with work efficiently and better. So this evening, it's going to be led Joellyn Gray from our leadership team in YANA, New England. We'll be kicking it off and then handing it over to our moderator and our amazing panelists. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panelists for joining us this evening. Thank you for those who are joining us. This program is being recorded. We usually clean it up and then we should have it sent out usually with a post-program survey within a week of the program. And all of our videos are archived on our YouTube channel, which you can get linked to from our website, which is yana.community, if you forget. So without further ado, just let people know, I will monitor the chat. And
looks like Rachel may have frozen.
Yep, I think so. So I'll leap right in. Welcome, everyone. I just wanted to thank our panel specifically. They're just an amazing group of people. And I wanted to point out that tonight's webinar is really to provide insight into the issues that are being faced by these key decision makers as they address the challenges presented by COVID-19 and begin a plan or complete a planning process that they began literally in March, really to face these challenges in an era of uncertainty. In particular, we're going to focus on 5 key areas. The first is e-learning. What is e-learning truly the best alternative? Secondly, health and safety. How can schools protect the health and safety of students, teachers, and staff? Third, social and emotional needs. What solutions really support the needs of students, teachers, and staff? Legal. What legal constraints and liabilities are informing their decision-making? And then finally, how does all of this impact the school's educational service delivery model and their business model? While we know that no one has clear answers to these challenges, we do know that leading educators like these often think creatively at the forefront of issues. And the ideas presented tonight will be a stimulating and provocative conversation about what we might expect and different ways to respond. I'd like to introduce our panel. I'm going to ask them to raise their hand when their name is called. The first is Jeremy Chiappetta. Jeremy is a graduate from the School of Management in '02. He's the CEO of Blackstone Valley Prep. It's a K-12 system of 6 different charter schools serving over 2,000 students in Rhode Island. The second is Meghan Hughes, class of '88. Meghan is the president of the Community College of Rhode Island, the largest community college in New England. And we have Pericles Lewis. Pericles is the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs at Yale and the VP of Global Strategy, and has been very actively involved in the decisions leading to how Yale will open up it this fall. And Leslie Torres-Rodriguez. Leslie is the Superintendent of Schools in Hartford, Connecticut. It is one of the largest urban public school systems in Connecticut. And I'd like to point out that both Leslie and Jeremy are actually Broad Fellows. And the new Broad Center is going to open up in summer 2021 at Yale. And that's an important part of the introduction of our moderator, Barbara Biasi. Barbara is a professor of economics at Yale SOM and will be very involved in the implementation of the Broad Center. So Barbara, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Joellyn, and thanks to all of the panelists for being here tonight. I'm very happy to be here myself. I want to start by expressing my congratulations to all of the panelists for the way that you handled the somewhat sudden closure of schools that happened in this past March due to COVID-19. I guess we can start by maybe going around and introducing the type of institutions that you supervised, and maybe giving us a sense of how you handled this sort of sudden situation this past spring. I guess we can start with Jeremy.
Thanks, Barbara.
Yeah.
So Blackstone Valley Prep is a public charter network in northern Rhode Island. We serve an urban and suburban community mix. One of our urban communities, Central Falls, has a higher percentage of COVID positivity in the community than New York City. So we are absolutely feeling the impact of COVID-19 physically, in addition to the economic impact and the educational impact in our community. I would say that we worked incredibly hard, incredibly rapidly, going all in as a school community to support the health and well-being of our families and of our kiddos. And I'm really proud of that. I think one of the things I'm most proud of is the rapid response that our team pulled together for about 2,000 young people. We were able to distribute that opening weekend over 600 laptops, Chromebooks to families. We did a survey of families, and we identified about 550 families who raised their hand and said that they didn't have 5 books in their home. And then we partnered with Barnes & Noble. We got a grant, and we direct shipped summer reading lists of books to over 500 of our families, and really worked, instantly to try to close those gaps, in addition to addressing issues of food security, addressing issues of those who aren't benefiting from documented programs for our undocumented families, in terms of identifying resources for them in particular to support housing and other financial supports within our community.
Looks like Barbara's frozen, so I'm going to ask Leslie, since you have a similar constituency, K-12, can you talk to us about what you managed to do?
Absolutely. So we have close to 19,000 students and 39 schools. We do operate within a school choice ecosystem. And so what that means for us is that out of our 39 schools, 18 of them are magnet schools, and 4,500 of our students do come in from 89 neighboring towns. And so that alone, right, adds an additional dynamic when we're thinking about how we respond and continue to plan moving forward. And like Jeremy, most of what we prioritized, of course, was making sure that we were meeting the basic needs that our students and our families had. And just to give you, just a quick overall view. So about 1 million meals we provided during the closures to students and families, 11,000 devices. We completely distributed our entire inventory of devices. And, we found that we had to implement other systems of support. So for example, we had our own health services hotline for our students, where we had more than 300 families access those. We did also have telehealth appointments that our own school nursing staff provided, and close to 300 families access those. And so the learning there for us was, it wasn't learning, it was actually a validation that, of course, our students and our families within some of our more higher need communities need, the wraparound supports. And it's something that we have to think about moving forward. And also, like Jeremy, the amount of work that we did in a short amount of time so that we can have an asynchronous model. In 12 days, we went from not having a plan to 12 days later, having a plan to roll out. And so lots of, iterations moving forward throughout the weeks, and knowing that, many lessons learned and still some concerns, moving forward.
Great. I guess we can maybe like switch to the higher education sector. Meghan, do you want to share your experience?
Sure, Barbara, thank you so much. And thanks to YANA for organizing this. I won't repeat what my colleagues Leslie and Jeremy have covered. My college, I think, I know it has a great deal in common with the population at BVP, and I'm going to assume a fair amount in common also with the district that Leslie oversees. So just to give you a sense of scale, we serve roughly 20,000 students. The majority of our students, our first generation college students, come from underrepresented communities and low-income families. In terms of kind of what happened in the middle of March, our college was on our 1-week spring break. And as that week unfolded, it became dramatically clear that we needed to close the college and pivot. So yes, we did it in 12 days, and we went from an institution where only 19% of our faculty had ever taught an online class. Only half of our students had ever taken an online class. We had all the technology challenges that Leslie and to some degree Jeremy have outlined, and we had to solve for it right away. And so I know the purpose of this panel is to talk about a go forward plan. I'll hold sort of further description of that. I would simply say, you know, as leaders, we were in a crisis. It was a crisis. We had to make decisions quickly, and we had to move. And in terms of what makes me proud about our college, I think I guess I'll just speak for our college. I don't think higher ed is really known for moving quickly or for being decisive. And this was a moment where we simply had to behave in a way that I don't think that we're known for. And we did. You know, when our backs were up against the wall, our 300 faculty, our 600 part-time faculty, and the other 1,000 people that work at the college just came together and said, this is the way we need to go. So I think, of course, the real test will be, that was crisis mode. We are using every hour of every day over this summer to get ready for fall. And it's that part of the conversation that I'm looking forward to having. I think that's where we should truly be evaluated. I would give us a strong mark for how we pivoted in the spring. Really what will matter now is how do we do now that we're in this new moment.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to discussing exactly this in just a moment, but I'm curious to hear the experience of Yale through Pericles' experience.
Thanks, Barbara, and thanks to everybody for having us. You know, Yale, of course, is a very globally engaged university, so the first signs we had of the COVID had to do with having to shut down the Yale Center Beijing and various other programs we have with China. And then to manage, as it hit Singapore, our joint venture Yale NUS College with the National University of Singapore, which I've been very involved with, and ultimately the Paul Mellon Center in London, and to bring back all the students that we could. Some were unfortunately stranded abroad. It was hard to get them back. But you know, I have to admit that when we got to about March 6th, that happened to be my daughter's 18th birthday, and we realized we were going to have to close down classes on campus, we were still a little bit surprised at the speed with which the virus had traveled and the intensity of the situation. We were a little bit fortunate, I think, because spring break happened just then, and so we had 2 weeks to get the faculty up and running online. I think both faculty and students reviewing the last 5 or 6 weeks of the semester felt that it was perhaps more successful than we would have expected, that there was a lot that we learned about how to educate people online, but we had to learn it very, very fast. And a lot of faculty who didn't have any particular interest in doing remote or online education had to learn it very fast. And so, you know, there were a few bumps along the way, but I think it was overall relatively successful.
Okay, great. So I think we can sort of go back to what Meghan was talking about just a moment ago. So I believe we still are facing a lot of uncertainty in terms of the way that the pandemic is going to evolve and the way that things are going to look like in the fall. But I'm curious to hear what your expectations are for how we're going to do things in the fall, what you have been planning. And most importantly, I'm curious about the timeline of the decision making. So do you have a set moment in time in which you're planning on making the decision of whether to go online or whether to go in person? And do you have any sort of triggers that will lead you to making that decision? And I guess we can follow the same order. Jeremy?
I will say that I am actually relieved that I don't believe it's going to be my decision. The state of Rhode Island, Governor Raimondo, a week ago or so, came out and was very aggressive and announced, you know, her intention and her expectation that we would be back for in-person instruction in the fall. And then guidance came out Friday of last week to every school system in the state saying, you need to prepare for these scenarios. And it's sort of, you know, what's the calculus term, a limit approaching infinity, is the number of scenarios that we're preparing for, it seems. But we are, you know, we are going to work with the guidance that's provided. We're going to partner with the Department of Health. We're going to work with our sending districts and area districts, but ultimately it's going to be the Rhode Island Department of Health that says, hey, you can come back for sure in person. You need to be fully on distance learning or some hybrid model. And I think we're all hoping for in person. I'm hoping for in person, and I'm expecting a hybrid.
Yeah, so I echo much of what Jeremy has said, although we have not received the guidance yet from our state officials. But it is going to require that we are at the ready to pivot very fast, whether that be locally at a school, if there is, you know, any case, and or even within a community. And so it is going to rely on very, you know, stabilized structures of collaboration and communication, not only with health officials, but, you know, with those other supports in our community to support our students and our families.
Meghan?
Sure. So at least so far, it is left up to the individual higher education institutions as to what we do in the fall. And we have largely made that decision. Before I share what that is, I'll offer just a couple of inputs as a way to provide some context. The first is, I do think an advantage that Rhode Island has is that we are, of course, the smallest state geographically, which has obvious, I think, advantages when you're trying to respond to a pandemic like this. There are 13 higher ed institutions in the state of Rhode Island, and 3 of which are public, of which the community college is one, obviously. And we've had, I think, a very well-led, state-led, coordinated system in close partnership with the Department of Health for, you know, and Jeremy and I are in different spaces in Rhode Island. One of the, I think, advantages that CCRI has been able to draw upon, and I'm looking now at you, Pericles, we are the only community college in Rhode Island. Brown, I always say, is the only Ivy League in Rhode Island. And Brown has just been fantastic helping us. I was on a call and Chris Paxton had like her whole Department of Public Health and the medical school and the epidemiologist. And I said the truth, which is we have one nurse, right? One nurse for 20,000 students. Brown has been incredibly helpful with our college, helping us set up what our plan looks like. What I will get to is this, and I'm really looking forward, Pericles, to what you have to say about where you think Yale is going in the fall. We are fundamentally different institutions, and we may have some things in common, sort of passion for mission and smart, talented, hardworking students another. Beyond that, I think we are very, very different organizations. And what that means for us is I've started with, we are a 20,000 student institution. We have 4 campuses that are 1 million square feet. So the office where I go to work every day is 300,000 square feet, and there are 7,000 students in it. So it's a small town. In addition to that, as Jeremy said when he began, you know, we serve the students whose families have been hardest hit by this pandemic. Those are the zip codes that our students are being drawn from, and we're a commuting school. So when I think about what I'm going to hear you offer, Pericles, we don't have that. We can't construct stable groups. Our students come to college, then they go to their first or their second job, and then they go back to the 3-family house they live in places like Central Falls. And so all of that is a preamble to say, I think this is certainly on the short list of most painful decisions I've made in my professional career, because this will not produce the best learning outcomes for our students, no matter how talented our faculty is and how good we get the technology. We will be almost entirely online in the fall. And as we continue the conversation, I'll talk about sort of other strategies we're going to bring in order to deliver what we know our students want, which is that on-campus experience. But for the fall, at least, with very few exceptions, we will be remaining in a remote fashion.
Well, thanks, Megan. Those agonies of making those choices are something I'm extremely familiar with. And so starting, March was all about getting the college up and running and the university up and running online. And of course, in the medical school, responding to the medical emergency, as I think lots of people know, the medical emergency peaked here in Connecticut in April, and we were the 3rd hardest hit state. But I think both Connecticut and Rhode Island have benefited from very good leadership. In Connecticut, we had a Reopen Connecticut commission that had a higher education subcommittee chaired by our former president and vice president, Rick Levin and Linda Lorimer. And it gave us a lot of good guidance about things like testing, contact tracing, and so on, very closely in consultation with the medical and public health experts at Yale. And I and my colleagues in the Provost office in turn have been very closely connected with the Connecticut higher education groups, especially the independent colleges who tend to work together on these matters, but also to some extent the publics. I think we're a very complex and very decentralized university, so to some extent decisions will be made by individual schools, but the guidance from the state made it clear that it's a little bit easier to open graduate and professional schools where the students typically live off campus. They're a little bit older and hopefully more mature. And arrangements like social distancing in the classroom are a little bit more realistic. With the undergraduates, we hope to bring students back to campus. A decision will be made in early July, but it's very likely that a large amount of the teaching will be done remotely in any case, partly because one of the guidelines from a public health point of view is not having excessively dense housing. And so we're probably going to move towards having singles rather than doubles for the students. That reduces our capacity. Also, international students who make up about 22% of the total Yale student body, a little less of the undergraduates, and students with compromised health or for various reasons unable to come to campus. We want to be able to serve them, so we're trying to make at least the large majority of our offerings available to people online, and we're trying to learn from the experiences of the past several weeks and best practices. So we're going through a whole bunch of training for our faculty over the summer. That said, things have been going in the right direction in Connecticut. The hope is that things like lab courses, studio art courses, courses in the collections and in the libraries may be offered more in person, probably typically in smaller groups.
Okay, great. So it seems like probably a little bit more so in the higher education sphere than in the K-12, but the fall is going to involve some degree of online learning. And I think by now it's evident to everybody that e-learning involves all of a series of issues ranging from equity in the delivery of the service that has to do with, students having different needs, having different levels of digital skills. Parental involvement is not the same across all students. Teacher training is also one other thing to keep in mind. So I'm just curious to hear how the scenarios that you have been planning for the fall are going to address these issues that are related to e-learning. And maybe we can start with Meghan and Pericles, and then also hear the plans for the K-12.
So it's interesting. It's how I know we're doing a K through 20 or 25 conversation. When I hear parental involvement, the way I respond is, many of our students are parents. So how they figure out to do their job, go to college at home, and then support their students learning at home, I think is a special challenge. I think where I will focus is just two places, and then turn it over to Pericles and others. Here is what I observed in the spring. If I go back to the crisis moment, we just had our faculty, we were teaching 2,400 sections. We just had to stand it up in some way online. What we now are doing is taking those courses and doing a much more thoughtful immersion, both how do you actually deliver a course effectively online. We all, my guess is, know what good examples of that look like and not so good examples. We for sure, I think, had a combination of both in the spring because that's what we had time for. So we are really focusing this summer on investing in very rich course design so that the experience feels, so that we achieve better learning outcomes. I think that's number one. I think number two, this is something I think about all the time, right? Let's all go back to our college days. Those professors who were incredible teachers, and the ones, I'll just say at Pericles, I'm sure this didn't happen at Yale, but incredible researchers who perhaps weren't the very best instructor you'd ever had. One of the things I think matters so much is how do we teach in this new mode? How do we truly speak to our students and connect to our students in a way that they feel that presence in the classroom? So I think that we've got a lot of work to do there. That's really about pedagogy. How do we learn how to teach in a new way? How do we support our students learning in a new way? So that comment. And then second, I think Pericles referenced kind of who you all are looking to bring back first. And where I can enter that conversation is, it is our anticipation that the courses that simply couldn't run, and for us, that's all of our healthcare work that really requires the practicums, and of course also things like our art classes. But we'll prioritize those. So the ones that just won't run at all, the place we will go next, the next cohort of students that we are going to focus on are our students who are at the very beginning of being college ready. So our shorthand for that is our developmental education students. If we bring back any body of students, that's where we're going to go first, because we know that body of students will benefit the most and has the most acute need to have that when they first arrive at college. We want that experience to be productive and positive. So that's sort of where our focus is going, and we'll see what happens in the fall.
There was a lovely piece by my colleague Ann Fadiman in the English department at Yale about the experience of Zoom teaching over the year. I think it was in Wired, over the 5 or 6 weeks, and just getting to know her students in a different way, seeing the interiors of their homes, finding out about the crises they were going through, learning how to relate to a Zoom camera, how to do breakout groups and that kind of thing. And I think while it's true that not every teacher is equally good at Yale, I think overall that the faculty are very devoted to being good teachers. And so we've had a lot of participation in workshops about things like, there's the language of synchronous versus asynchronous, which more or less means live versus recorded. Which things do you do live? Which things do you provide to the students online so they can do it on their own? What kinds of exercises work well in the small breakout rooms? How do you do a physics lab online? And we have a great set of recordings called the Virtual Faculty Bulldog Days, where faculty took little bits of their teaching experience that they were particularly proud of and sort of annotated them to help other faculty learn how to do things. In terms of broader course design, there is a plus because it's not always easy to get the faculty into our Provost Center for Teaching and Learning. But now faculty are coming in and saying, how do I redesign the course in order to make it available online? And so they're thinking through, some of those innovations are specific to the online environment, but some of them are just better ways to help students with learning. And so I think in the long run, we may have some positive outcomes from that. In terms of priorities, we want to make sure that people aren't delayed in graduating. We want to make sure that first-year students are able to start. And we also want to make sure that low-income students have the right support. As you probably know, Yale is very diverse now, maybe not compared to some of the other institutions represented, but compared to what it was, say, 22 years ago when I started teaching here. And we have a large number of students on Pell Grants and low-income students, students who are first generation in their families to go to college. There was a question about international students. The special challenge there, of course, is about half of our international students are living in the US, so they should be able to make it back to their programs if they're available in person. The ones who are abroad, there are quarantines, there are difficulties getting visas, consulates that aren't open, and so on. So I think we're expecting to have to deliver a lot of that education online, or that people may take leaves of absence.
Great. So I'm curious to hear something about the scenarios planned by Leslie and Jeremy.
I can offer what we're thinking about, and this is, of course, not knowing what the guidance is going to be yet, but knowing that we're going to at some point have to go to some type of blended remote structure. And so, you know, we have several principles that we are being mindful as we design our what we're calling Return to Learn and Accelerate plan. And first and foremost is focusing on the people, on our people, right? Our students, our staff, and our families. And, you know, as it relates to students, I have to think about, of course, organizing our resources, our people, our time, and our money to make sure that our students have the supports that they need. And so, yes, technology shifting to a one-to-one. We were not a one-to-one. And though we have confirmed that 96% of our students have access to a device. 56% there are devices, but you know, families have reported that you know, another 40% of them do have their own devices. The reliable internet access is still a challenge for us, right? So we partnered with the local internet provider to provide our families with a 3-month, you know, supply, if you will, of internet. We did distribute the 600 hotspots, but we have to think about what does that look like, you know, for next year. And then I also think about learning recovery, of course, and the relationships, the social and emotional supports at the student level. Also within that students first, people first principle is, you know, designing for equity. And when I examine the data from, you know, the closures, there are trends that actually align with pre-COVID data in terms of student outcomes. So we know that we're going to prioritize our 450 or so students that are homeless. We know that we're going to prioritize the 851 families out of our 18,000 that did request tech-free materials, even though they had access to a device and a hotspot. They still chose to go tech-free. We our English learners, right, that's the subgroup that had the least activity, had the least access to internet. And so we have very specific data points that are going to help us design and be, you know, mindful of our equity commitment. And then the other piece that I will add is, you know, solving for the needs of our human capital, our educators. They too have, you know, needs around technology and their knowledge base and skill set, and even their disposition as to what an asynchronous or a synchronous, you know, delivery model could look like. And so, you know, I can go on about other principles, but you know, we are going to, at the core, start our planning with, you know, just the people first principle.
Right. Jeremy?
I preferred going first because I don't know how I follow that. What I think maybe a yes, and as I think about our K-12 system and I think about the governor's priorities, education's an economic engine, and it's a long-term economic engine because we are preparing young people to access the American dream, access careers, access jobs. And in the short term, it is also very real, and it is not lost on any of us, that parents being able to go to work is in part a function of kids being able to go to school. And when I look at the reopening priorities, I anticipate elementary being prioritized in terms of who comes back first. And there's educational reasons for that as well. I mean, I think when I think of my daughter who's 15 and going into the 10th grade, her ability to access technology, use technology, learn from technology is just vastly different than, you know, a rising kindergartner starting school. And so I think that, you know, at the K-12 level, prioritizing our early grades is likely, I think we're going to see a lot of that for that very reason. And as we look across the world, Denmark did precisely that. Denmark opened up their early elementary schools early for that very reason. And fortunately, they did not see spikes in the virus either. And so that, I think, gives us hope as we think about this work.
Okay, great. So I want to move on and briefly touch on the issues of health and safety. So it seems like, with the exception of Meghan's case, you are envisioning some in-person instruction in the fall. And so I would like to maybe briefly talk about the procedures that you're thinking of putting in place in order to keep an eye on the health of students, but also of teachers and staff. And I'm also curious as to whether you have some sort of trigger that would lead you to close down the schools if necessary.
Who would you like to start, Barbara?
You can start, Pericles.
Sure. So obviously our situation is very different from some of the others. I have the hugest respect for K through 12 teachers, and especially people who lead those complex systems. And I see among our faculty and our staff the challenge of trying to teach their kids at the same time that they're teaching our students. You know, it's just, it's been such an amazing experience in that way. As I said, I have college kids at home, so they're a little bit easier to monitor than you know, 6-year-olds or 13-year-olds. The health and safety of our students, of course, and our staff and our faculty is really paramount to us. We're particularly concerned about, you know, older faculty and staff and those who have underlying health conditions. And that's one of the reasons for that we will have a good amount of teaching done online. We'll have food instead of the buffet style food. We'll have sort of bento box style food instead. In terms of making sure that we maintain health on campus, fortunately, we were given some pretty helpful guidelines by the state. We may go a little bit beyond what's required. We'll test everybody as they come back to school, probably twice, to make sure that they didn't catch it, so, you know, that there wasn't some false negative or they caught it on the train or the airplane. And then subsequently, those who are living on campus, and probably the undergraduates who are living in the city, because about a quarter of our, or about maybe 15% of our students live in New Haven off campus, we would test them much more frequently, depending on public health guidance. It's a sort of a ratio between how much prevalence you know there is in the community, what the last week's tests say, and that sort of thing. But essentially, we're planning for frequent testing, and then isolation of anybody who tests positive.
Great. Leslie?
Yeah, so we are also eagerly awaiting state, health official guidance. But if I had to say where are we today in terms of our planning, we would think about the temperature checks on a daily basis for students and staff. And it's a question of well, who does that? Is it that we do that at the bus stop? Because we have students, as if you heard me at the beginning when I talked about 89 sending towns, and we have students that are on a bus at times for 90 minutes to get to school in the morning and back. And so who does that? What is that, what does that protocol look like? And then, thinking about what happens when they get to the school door, and, practicing the good hygiene, the washing the hands, the added sanitizers. We've heard conversation about the air quality and So there's a lot of still conversations that have to happen, and also taking into account where again, going back to our staff, right? Is any one of them, like, was referenced before, at risk? And how do we, support our staff in their return that might require them to be remote? And so how does that delivery model get, shifted so that we can still account for not only our students, but, the staff that we need to continue to operate our system?
Jeremy?
I ordered 700 gallons of hand sanitizer today for the first month and a half of school. I hear kids on school buses for 90 minutes, and all I can think about is the metaphor one of my colleagues offered, which is school buses are mini cruise ships. And I don't think anyone's jumping on a cruise ship anytime soon, based on how we saw this virus get going early on. And knowing so many of our kids do ride buses, and the CDC guidance has, one kid every other seat right now. Like, the economic model of school busing is blown through the roof, precisely at a time when we're going to have far fewer dollars to invest in our kids and our staff. So we are, we are working with our school nurses. I have 6 times the number of nurses as Meghan does. So we have 6. We have a school doctor who's mostly a full-time doctor, but consults to us. They're on our reopening committee to ensure that we're following guidance. Our elementary kids are going to be in stable pods. We know that. And high school kids, we don't know how to schedule into stable pods. We haven't been able to figure that out. It's not to say we won't, but we haven't yet. And so the guidance from Rhode Island says the classrooms must be sanitized between stable pods shifting. So we're sort of mind blown right now in terms of how we run school without stable pods at the high school level and sanitize. So we're literally sourcing like these, backpack sprayers that fog rooms, hit the surfaces. And we can, in our heads, get around doing that every night. But to do that between classes at the high school level is mind-blowing.
Yeah, it does sound challenging. Speaking of which, the next point that I wanted to touch is social and emotional support. So I think we can all agree that we have been experiencing a lot of new emotions in this new and unexpected situation, and also a great deal of stress coming not only from the health concerns, but also from the disruption of our daily routines, from the social distancing and having to be at home, having to deal with new responsibilities, both on the job and at home. And so I wanted a little bit to talk about, and I know that we have touched upon this a little bit before. I think Leslie mentioned it, but what systems of support are you thinking about in terms of social and emotional support for the students, but also for the teachers and the staff and the administrators? And maybe we can start with Leslie, since I think you mentioned something before.
So we are going to continue to offer the telehealth and the telemedicine, regardless of health insurance status for our students and their families. And we also have to think about, and we've started to have the conversations as to what does that look like for staff? What can it look like beyond employee assistance programming? And so that's a conversation that we're thinking through. And as it relates to the system of supports, we are fortunate in Hartford that we have community assets. We have 9 schools specifically that are community schools. They have a community school framework in which they have wraparound supports. And so now the question is, what does that look like for the other 32 schools, knowing that there's going to be a need across the entire system. And so then, there is an opportunity for us to take this ecological stance, is how I call it, right? So that we can enlist the support of all of our community-based providers. The challenge there is, right, who leads in terms of organizing that structure, given such short notice, if you will. And so I think that's where data becomes a powerful resource for us, so that we can, in short time, communicate with our CBOs, our community-based organizations, as to the very specific needs that our family support staff in our schools are flagging when they communicate with our students and with their families.
Okay. Jeremy?
I dropped in the chat just now a link to a social emotional learning website, a set of resources that our social workers, as they were compiling and sharing and distributing, one of them was like, look, I know how to do a Google site. Like, let me just put this together. It's going to be so much more efficient, and it will auto-translate, And so, this is just, our staff said, hey, here's a gap, here's a need, let's fill it, and let's communicate with our families. And so, I put that link in there. It's just, it's one example of the response. I think as we look at our instructional minutes for next year, we are very cognizant of the need for social emotional learning time, which is embedded and built into our curriculum in different ways, and it's going to have added time, which is also scary, because we are anticipating massive learning gaps at the same time, and so there's this desire to have more academic time, but we're not going to get anywhere with academics if we're not meeting the needs of our kids and our families. We know that, so we're having that precise conversation internally right now.
Okay. Meghan, do you want to jump in?
Sure. When I talked about the fact that we will be delivering the majority of the instruction online, I sort of prefaced that we are working hard to figure out how to bring as many of our students back to campus in other ways in order to give them that stickiness that we know is so important for all of us, really, to build connection. And so if I start just there, what we're working right now, and of course what happened with the virus will determine the degree to which we can pull this off. But what we're talking about now is building our analog of stable pods and creating groups of students that we bring back to a specific campus. They stay in a specific group, and maybe it in this case would be our advanced manufacturing students. They get to study together. We take over the huge spaces that are in some of our buildings, and that way we can have these groups of students inside, so they can connect with their peers, meet with tutors, see an advisor, perhaps have some kind of in-person engagement with their faculty, depending on the situation. So this plan, as I'm sure you can all hear, is very much in design. The timing of how we arrived at this decision, once we made that painful decision that we were going to deliver most of the instruction online, we immediately then pivoted to, so how were we going to do everything we can to create those in-person opportunities for our students? It's under design right now. So that's the first offering. The second is, what our faculty have done is nothing short of extraordinary. And what I hear just every day in emails from students and from faculty, in addition to being incredible educators, just the care that I know is going from them to our students through these devices, it's incredibly moving and inspiring. And so they're doing that. I know they're doing that every day. And then we, of course, have a whole roster of counselors and advisors and social workers. The folks even in our financial aid office, I think, are so focused on serving our students through this very difficult moment. So in terms of that part, how are we focused on really supporting our students? I don't have a complete roadmap now, but I know the direction we're headed. I think an ongoing question that we need to advance over the summer is how are we supporting our faculty, and how are we supporting all the other staff that are under a tremendous amount of stress in their personal lives, and then, you know, the addition of what we are all needing to do, which is to work in this new fashion. So I know that our head of academic affairs is working with a body of faculty to get some guidance and some input as to how can we as a college really build that support for our faculty and our staff. I think sitting in the seat that I sit in, you know, certainly part of what led us to the decision that we've made is a significant percentage of our faculty and staff are in a group that is at risk. So while we serve many adult learners that are in a higher risk, many of our students are in a relatively, for themselves, low risk category. That is not true for the 2,000 employees at the college. And so the early feedback we've gotten is and I'm speaking generally here, but the paraphrase is, I can't wait to get back to the classroom, and thank you for waiting until we have confidence that we can do that safely to bring me back.
I do think it's a very tough time in our nation, socially and politically. The murder of George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement, and the uneven effect that COVID has had on minority communities and lower socioeconomic groups has added to the huge stress that was already there in the system, and that was always likely to break out to some extent in an election year and in the fall of this particular election year. So I'm very concerned about the social and mental and emotional well-being of our students, and indeed also our faculty and staff, in the context of all of the political and social challenges of this time. Of course, over the last several years, we've seen a huge increase in the need for mental health services, and that's somewhat independent of the social and political context, but it certainly, you know, there's extra strain there this year, no doubt. And we are also, like Leslie, providing telehealth. Our counselors and therapists also need protection. So the amount of in-person therapy, for example, that can be offered is somewhat limited. The spaces, somebody asked about facilities, the spaces of the health plan are not perfectly designed for social distance. Like a group therapy session might not be able to take place given the amount of space that's available in a room that was designed for group therapy, and so on. So this is probably the most challenging dimension of the fall. I think we're putting resources there. We're trying to come up with plans to help students and faculty and staff through this difficult time, but I think we all have to be realistic that it's going to be a very challenging several months ahead.
Great. Okay, so before we conclude, so I think it's, I would say, pretty evident that your delivery models, not just in terms of, you know, curriculum and instruction, but also financial business models, on-campus living and learning models are shifting, are changing to sort of adapt to the new situation. And you have described to various extents how this is happening. One thing that I'm curious to hear is whether you envision these changes to be just temporary, or whether part of that is going to be permanent. I can turn this to Leslie, if that's okay.
Sure. So some initial thinking that we've had as it relates to the guiding principles. One of those guiding principles that I did share with my leadership team is around how do we build and plan for coherence and our long-term strategy, right? We pre-COVID were doing a lot of work on you know, really looking at our curriculum and our assessments and looking at it from an equity and culturally relevant perspective, and then COVID happens. And so as we now think about what it is that we're going to prioritize in order to accelerate student learning, we have to do that within the context of, you know, the 2 years and then after that. And so initially, what we've started to do is to think about how are we going to prioritize the most critical prerequisite skills and the knowledge, of course, for each grade level and on grade level, right? It's not about remediation for us, is how do we create the conditions supporting our staff to support our students to accelerate their learning. And that is going to require that we diagnose, you know, where our students ended in March, recalibrating our scope and sequence, of course, building capacity in our staff, and then adding to that or overlaying that the capacity that we have to build with regard to, you know, a distance learning, potentially remote environment. And there is one structure that we are going to continue to improve. We implemented when we closed, and that was what I call a nested level of support. So we had a central office team that also had teachers that, you know, were already well-versed in synchronous delivery models. And so they became part of our design team. And then we had 2 coaches in each of the 39 schools that we have. And so we want to continue with that model so that we can, you know, extend the capacity building and look beyond these next 2 years, because I do foresee that we are not going to go back to, you know, 100% the way we were. That's just the way I see it now.
Cool. Jeremy?
I think one of, if we do anything well at Blackstone Valley Prep, it's sending out surveys, right? We send out surveys nonstop to our staff, to our families, to our kids. And you know, it's mostly tongue in cheek as I say that, but I will say one of the survey questions that we asked multiple times this spring of our faculty and staff was, you know, what from this do we need to hold on to when we do our next iteration? Like, what are we learning and experiencing now? And, you know, really insightful answers. And we're sort of combing through that. And they did evolve a little bit over time from, you know, mid-March to the end of the school year. But what I will say is a theme that's guiding is the relationship between the faculty and the family, the faculty and the student, but the family, that forged relationship through check-ins, through Zooms with parents, through all of that is absolutely something that we don't want to lose and we want to build on. And I think that is that's really central to how we're thinking about, you know, all of the elements of this coming school year, is how do we hold on to that and how do we build off of that? Because, you know, if we're in partnership with families, we have a shot. And if we are not in partnership with families, no, it's not going to work.
Interesting. Meghan, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yep. I think what COVID has done for our college is give us the requirement to do something we already needed to do. We increasingly will serve larger numbers of returning adult learners. And for that population of our institution, only offering a small minority of courses in an online fashion was never going to work. We knew that before the pandemic. So what the spring and I anticipate the fall will allow us to do is to figure out how to be far more responsive to a critical part of Rhode Island that needs a college degree. So I am optimistic that this crisis has allowed us to kind of unlock what was clearly already there with our faculty and staff, which is just to be innovative. So I'm incredibly excited about where I think we can go in that space. And I think so many other higher education institutions share that. We feel it acutely, given who we serve. I think the second piece goes beyond the classroom, and that is, we know, right, that technology does have the capacity to help us do some parts of our work better. And at our college, myself included, I didn't take advantage of plenty of that. I was too busy, focusing on whatever the top priorities were right in front of me. So I'll just speak for myself. What the virus has forced all of us to do is radically rethink what really matters and how to do it well. And very practically, I'll just give a couple of examples, because for college students, while the essential part may be what you're doing in the classroom, our students also need to understand, how do they fill out their FAFSA? How do they actually secure their financial aid? Where do they pay their bill? How do they enroll in classes? How do they connect to an advisor? All of those things we've gotten so much better at using technology in a very short period of time. And so, again, Pericles, we have very different challenges among my many. I can imagine what the teacher to advisor ratio looks like at Yale, and I would do anything to take 50 of yours and bring them to our college. Ours is right now, I think it's 500 students to every advisor. Right. Wow. So that's not the experience I had at Yale 35 years ago. I feel like I had my own personal advisor. So the technology piece is a way, particularly for our students who are native to data and to technology, to actually get what I will never be able to purchase for them in a different way. So I'm excited about sort of some of these opportunities, and the fall will be an opportunity for us to test whether we're getting better.
So I guess a related point is our former provost used to talk about collisional frequency, and one of the reasons that a college, and especially a research university like Yale, that it has a residential college and also has all of the graduate and professional schools and the top researchers, one of the reasons that it's valuable is the chance for people to run into each other, whether that's two people who are working on different aspects of a research program who wind up meeting in a seminar, or whether it's the people you meet down the hall in the residential college that you're living in, or a class you happen into that you didn't expect, or something you find in one of the galleries or in the Peabody Museum. And it's very, very challenging, because collisional frequency is also helpful to viruses, because it allows viruses to communicate, to be communicated. And so we're going to have to come up with a model, at least in the next year, that allows for a lot of the benefits of people just running into each other, while at the same time everybody has to stay 6 feet apart and wear a mask. And that does really drain how easily you can with others in the less formal ways. Now, Zoom and the college curriculum are designed around more formal interactions, but an interesting dimension of Yale is also that we all over the world, and a very diverse group of Americans here to New Haven, and then they go out and work all over the world, and they have all these relationships as represented by this group tonight and other alumni groups, and other opportunities for back and forth with graduates of Yale. And I think that one benefit, or at least one positive thing that we could come up with coming out of this, is how to be more effective in using those sort of virtual networks that happen outside of New Haven. And other than just coming back for your 5-year reunion, I've noticed that alumni groups are getting more active in more of this kind of virtual town hall and that sort of thing. But there may be other more informal ways to connect students, faculty, alumni, other parents, even other interested groups. Some of that will be through formal things like online courses, but some of it might be through a lot more informal methods. And I think that could help us to create a different kind of collisional frequency that might be valuable.
Great. I like this way of thinking of crisis as an opportunity for learning and sort of leaving the certain things in the past and kind of focusing on innovating. So I want to make sure we leave enough time for questions at the end. I just want to very quickly hear if there is one thing that's keeping you up at night, or like the biggest risk or something that you see as unsolvable. What would that be? Leslie? Or if someone else has an answer ready.
Well, I'm just trying to pick one. One thing that keeps me up at night. I would say it is making sure that we're able to ensure the health and safety of our students and our staff. Physical, yes, but then emotional. I reflect on the last 3 months, and in addition to the stressors of having to manage both home and professional at the same time, in the same space, and boundaries and all the enmeshment that that has happened, add to that the loss. There's a level of loss that our students and our faculty has experienced, and so creating space and support for that to some healing as a community, so that we can then tend to the next level of challenge that we have. And so that keeps me up at night, tending to the basic emotional needs and support.
I would just add that we want to keep everybody healthy, and we want to bring undergraduates back to campus. How do we get the undergraduates to follow the basic public health rules? That's what I worry about.
So I can go. I'm struck by some similarities and some differences. I've known it since March, and now we're living it. The first is community colleges. If we were only dealing with a recession, the worst everyone on this call has experienced in our lifetimes, my enrollment should be going through the roof. I should be reaching out to everyone I know to find as many professors to come and teach, and that is not the case. And that's the first time in our college's 55-year-old history that we are not responding to the economic downturn with an enrollment increase. So what keeps me up at night? That we have first-time college students who are not enrolling at the most affordable college in Rhode Island. They're not coming, and that we are not getting our returning students. And what we know about those students, our first-generation students, if they stop out, the likelihood that we pull them back goes significantly down. So mine is very basic, very elemental, unless and until we can create a college that feels inviting to our students to come back and keep them safe and our broader community safe. We are creating, I think, a very real crisis in Rhode Island, and so I'm concerned.
I would echo both of those, thinking about my 85 new alumni who are going off to the world, many of whom are scheduled to go to the Community College of Rhode Island. And quite frankly, we're having conversations with them, trying to keep them going, and it's going to be really hard. I think, I echo the health safety. I would add the thing that brought me to this work 20 plus years ago, and continues to drive me, and I think in this moment in particular drives me even more, is my fear for the massively widening achievement gaps, which I believe will lead to opportunity gaps for our Black and brown kids and our low-income kids. And I think, as we think about where our country is right now, and the resurgence of a very important Black Lives Matter conversation, and we think about becoming anti-racist as a community, to think that we are not going to, we're at that very same moment, we're widening achievement gaps for our young people. It keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I was looking at the data just a few days ago, and it seems something that is just happening everywhere in the country, unfortunately. Okay, just to end on a kind of happier note, I'm curious to know what you think is the silver lining of all of this. And I think that Meghan has already sort of spoken to that a little bit in kind of describing this this crisis as an opportunity to innovate. I'm curious to hear about the others. What's the one, if you will, positive aspect of all of this?
Well, I do hope we'll develop new ways of delivering online education that will be valuable to people away from Yale. I'm not talking about granting a bachelor's of arts or anything to people who never come to New Haven, but I am talking about, you know, maybe more advanced professional certificates or sharing in some of the enrichment that students at other places or adults or high school students at other places could get from some of our great lecturers and teachers. So I'm hoping that we can share our resources more widely.
Great. Jeremy or Leslie, do you want to add something?
Yeah, so I can add just the opportunity, right? There's a silver lining in the fact that there is opportunity in front of us here, and we were able to reach out to confirm that 96% of our students had access, right, to a device, whether it was ours or theirs. We were able to ensure that every K-12 classroom, right, was now on a Google Classroom platform. And so there is opportunity for us to innovate moving forward. And the other piece that excites me is the opportunity to co-create with our teachers and with our community on behalf of our students.
Great.
Yeah, I would just amplify the co-creation and echo what I said earlier, which is the relationships with families. And this has been a moment where I think schools and families in our best versions have come really closely together, and in our worst versions don't communicate at all. I'm pretty excited about what we've done to communicate well, and that gives me hope. Great.
So it's very nice to hear. Okay, so thanks to all of our panelists for this for their insights. I know that Rachel has been taking some questions from the chat. I also know that we are a little bit running out of time, so maybe we can take one or two.
Yeah, I think, thank you, everyone. I think, and to those of you who are individually answering questions as they popped up and people helped answer those. I think some of the larger questions about rethinking curriculum or what is learning, and for the K-12, that's sort of, is it time to think about challenges, that real life problems, how does that work in connection with, with Common Core, or what is it that we're teaching? Obviously you can't make those decisions alone. And and then I think, Pericles, you started to think about this. What is the role of higher education institutions, particularly those that have a lot of resources? Those are some of the big ones. The one issue I don't know if you really touched on, I hate to turn this to a slightly more negative, but what is the budgetary effect? I mean, we're talking about staff, faculty, we don't know enrollment, obviously public schools are something different. What might this look like? You've got faculty, staff, Meghan, a lot of your students are parents who have jobs and enrollment is down. Not to put a damper on this, but I mean, that is clearly a reality factor. And as you were saying, this is not like we're just in a recession and people are going to go wait it out, or kids who are graduating from high school may go take a gap year or something. That this is really deep. And it's a question for places like Yale, like how are we going to handle, not having the kind of budget to support the full system and all the other things that go around running a college or a school. So,
and Rachel, can I just add to that? And what role do you think government will play in helping you close that gap?
Out there now. Let's throw it out there and talk about it for a few minutes while we have it.
Well, Yale, of course, is very fortunate in this regard, and I don't want to pretend that our budget problems are anything like the budget problems of most other places. The hospital had to shut down a lot of its activity that was not COVID related. And so the medical school ran a deficit this year. We returned room and board to students who went home. And so, we lost some funds there. We chose not to accept support under the CARES Act because that was considered better to use the funds for more needy institutions. We've been running a deficit. I think it's going to take us 5 years to get out of the deficit. Salaries are frozen right now, but I think we've avoided large amounts of layoffs, and I'm hopeful that we'll get back on track. But there will certainly be some adjustment over the next few years.
So I can go next because very little of what you just said is what I'm living. And I'll simply say this. If there isn't another relief package coming out of Washington, I actually can't tell you how we run our college even at the to the bone way we were running it last year. It's just that simple. So, you know, the CARES relief package came out. CCRI serves the highest number of low-income students in Rhode Island. We got the highest dollar amount. Probably everyone on this call knows how that package worked. Half the money rightly went as emergency aid directly into our students' pockets. The other half was to support our college running ourselves in this new way. Our budget from state appropriation got cut to the dollar, the amount of the relief funding that came from the federal government. So we are facing just for this year, in the last 2 weeks of June, a 10% budget reduction from state appropriations. Our enrollment is down. We have to figure out how we're going to pay for all the things we've all been describing. And we're already serving the most under-resourced, highest need population in the country. So I am counting on our federal delegation to figure it out and to provide the support that is not nice to have, fundamental to us actually operating as a college. So I thought about sharing that as what keeps me up at night, but I think it would have made it hard for me to even continue. It's everything, and I am hopeful that next month we will see another relief package coming out of DC.
What she said. I never thought I would be so hopeful for Mitch McConnell to do the right thing as I am right now.
I was thinking about Jack Reed, but keep going, Jeremy.
Well, Jack is already all in. We know that, right? It's the leadership that's in power right now that has to decide this is valuable, this is important, this is our priority, and I'm hopeful they see that.
I too am concerned for financial sustainability. You know, as I think pre-COVID, and this will be my fourth budget, I've had to mitigate $105 million over the last 4 years, right? So it's about 20 to 25 million every year. And so had it not been for the opportunity to roll over and carry over funding, you know, at the state and federal level, I still would have been in a $10 million deficit going into next year. And so that's pre-COVID. And yes, there's a, you know, $10 million CARES Act fund, and I still don't have a strategy fully baked and do not know what it's going to look like past 2 years.
Amazing. Honestly, I sit here in awe of all of you. You are dealing with among the most critical issues in the country. The decisions you make have long-range impact for many generations to come as kids deal with, you know, when I think about the elementary schools and the learning gap and how that's going to build over time. And when I think about what you mentioned, Meghan, about the issue of people just dropping out of university, and Pericles, the global reach of Yale and the risk of minimizing that impact and losing that burst of connectivity across students. I mean, all of it is so far-reaching and so profound. I just hope you do sleep at night and you wake up fresh and can solve problems every morning. You're doing a remarkable, remarkable job. And Barbara, thank you so much for moderating. You did a fantastic job on that. I thank you all. There will be a recording of this event in a couple of days, as Rachel said, and we did see a message, people asking if they could share this with their institutions and other locations, and certainly we will make that available. So thank you all. Keep doing the good work.
Thank you, everybody.